Well, this terror investigation also led to a couple of dramatic exchanges at the White House briefing today, as the administration again tried to use this attack to push for gun control. First, when asked about a recent uptick in gun sales, Press Secretary Josh Earnest called it tragic that a number of people feel the need to go out and buy weapons after seeing these two jihadis slaughter defenseless folks at a Christmas party. Then Earnest went a step further. When asked if President Obama plans to visit the scene of the worst terror attack on U.S. soil since 9/11. Listen.
What are the president's thoughts about traveling to San Bernardino, even if you don't have any plans to announce? Is this something he'd like to do? Is something he's thinking about doing?
I've not asked him this question directly. I'm sure that it's something that somebody here has considered. It's not uncommon for the president, in the aftermath of some of these kinds of incidents, to visit these communities that were touched so directly by an incident of gun violence.
Gun violence? Joining me now, Charles Krauthammer, author of Things That Matter, now out in paperback among his many qualifications. Dr. Charles Krauthammer, good to see you. So, this community touched by gun violence.
It makes you wonder if there's a gun control cult in control in the White House. You could forgive the president for saying, even 2 days after the attack, 3 days after the attack, for looking for ways to say this was not an act of terror and to try to link it with gun control. But we now, and everybody at the time knew, but the president was hanging on, hoping that it would be something else. It is so obvious now, undeniable. The fact that they insist on this really explains a lot of things. It explains the rise in gun sales. It explains the rise in anxiety in the country. I would say it explains the rise of candidates like Trump, who speak unashamedly about what is actually going on, I think to an extreme, but nonetheless who say what the president refuses to say. And that is refreshing for a lot of people. But this is a sense of drift. These kinds of indications that you mentioned about the terror links, the histories of the two shooters, is the kind of stuff we saw in the 9/11 report. Story after story of obvious clue, missed, overlooked, not communicated, not taken seriously. For a while, that's for about a decade, we tried to undo that by being absolutely scrupulous, really careful and serious about this. Now for 7 years, we've had an administration where they attribute everything to the weapon, and it makes you wonder, how can they possibly, this can't be cynicism, there has to be a kind of belief to the point where people shake their heads and wonder, is there anybody in charge here?
It does play into the Trump thing, because what we now see is that there were multiple connections between these two and extremists and actual terrorists, as it turns out, and people who are trying to radicalize Americans, for that matter, on the FBI's radar. And the president knows this. His team knows this. The president comes out and as we talked about, puts the need to not discriminate against Muslims on equal footing with the need to protect America from terrorists. But on the point about protecting us, he's not going to change anything. And people are saying, why don't you start by looking at the people who are here and the people who want to come here and tighten up the programs to make sure those of us who actually are American citizens are safe?
This is a president who came into office, and one of the first things he did is he abolished the use of the term, the global war on terror. He believed that he could wish it away. He gave a speech 2 years ago at the National Defense University in which he said, we cannot go on this way with indefinite war because of the damage it does to our society. Well, that is fine, except for the fact that wars end either by consent of the two sides or when one side is defeated. If you pretend there's no war on terror, if you tell the American people, as he did in his re-election campaign, the tide of war is receding, when it is obviously rising everywhere in the world, the Middle East, and now we see in the West, in Paris, in Belgium, in the United States, you tell them this, people have to wonder whether your commitment to this ideology overrides your ability to see reality. Obama's response to the attack in Paris, climate change. This is the greatest stroke that we can take against terror by showing up in Paris and continuing.
And that's
with
another
climate
reason why he
change.
doesn't want to bomb the oil fields that ISIS was controlling, because of the environmental impact it might have. I mean, there's a frustration as to whether, and the rules of engagement we have that don't allow us to, drop our bombs unless there's a guarantee there will be 0 civilian casualties. And so we've bent over backwards, and it doesn't seem like we're getting that far with the people who we're supposed to be extending the hand with. I want to ask you, though, about what Josh Earnest said. He hasn't spoken with the president about whether the president's going to go to San Bernardino. It's tragic that people are rushing to guns for self-protection in the wake of what we've seen, where the government did not protect them. And on top of all that, he refers to this as gun violence, and the president apparently has no plans to go out there, even though we saw him go to places like Charleston when there was a massacre there. Why wouldn't he go to the site of a mass terror attack?
It's ideology. Because if he goes, he highlights the terror threat. He brings back the idea that we are involved in a war on terror. He invalidates and in a way refutes the last 7 years of his insistence that this is not an existential issue. And look, this is a man who believes, because you have to ask yourself, how can he believe all this? He believes either that the war on terror is an exaggeration, that it has strategically insignificant. Yes, it kills a few people here and there, but it's not a major threat, like, as he believes, climate change. I believe that's delusional, but I think he does believe that. But I think he also believes that our overreaction, and he said this, speeches to the UN and elsewhere, our overreaction to 9/11 helped to produce the blowback. This is sort of the Ron Paul theory.
And many people believe
it's
that.
Jeremiah Wright theory, chicken coming home to roost, that American imperialism is the cause of this, so we have to cure ourselves, restrain ourselves, be extremely nice ourselves, and that's the way to respond.
Charles, thank you.
My pleasure.